Hey there. So for my third project, I attempted to make a replica of Roman concrete. So in order to try to reproduce Roman concrete, I first looked into how concrete was made in general and found out some information there before trying to find information on Roman concrete in particular. So the first thing is that there is a difference between cement and concrete, which I did not know prior to this project. Cement is sort of the binding agent of concrete, and concrete is a mixture of cement and some aggregate of some sort to sort of give it bulk. So the actual process of making cement in our modern world is fairly complicated, involves a lot of industrial processes that aren't particularly relevant. However, lime is an important ingredient to this process. Lime is similarly important in Roman concrete, and so I did some research to look into how Roman concrete was made. Unfortunately, the exact recipe is lost to time, but we do know that it contained volcanic ash, calcium carbonate, otherwise known as lime, and some sort of aggregate. So, as the common ingredient here is lime, I did some research on lime and found two modern types of lime that I would be able to purchase easily. The first is granulated lime, which is a finely ground limestone. The second is quicklime, of which I had an incomplete understanding of when I started the project. And even though I didn't end up using quicklime, I learned a lot more about it by the end of the project. So I went out to a couple of hardware stores and purchased some materials. I bought a bucket for mixing and some granulated lime, but unfortunately was unable to find any volcanic ash or volcanic sand at the several stores that I went to. I decided to get some beach sand as the next best thing. I figured that while I was unable to find volcanic ash or volcanic sand, that in some parts of ancient Rome, ancient Romans were also likewise unable to find volcanic ash or volcanic sand and may have used regular sand as it was much more widely available. With my safety gloves on, I began to do some measurements. In my research on modern concrete, I came across a ratio of 1 part cement to 2 parts sand to 3 parts aggregate. As the ancient Roman recipe is lost, I figured that this would work as well as any other recipe. I measured out 1 cup of granulated lime and began mixing small amounts of water to it at a time until it was wet enough to have formed a paste. When I figured my cement was wet enough, I began mixing it with 2 cups of beach sand. This became crumbly very quickly, so I added more water for a total of 1 cup of water. Once the water was added, the mixture felt like a proper mortar, so I dumped in 3 cups of the aggregate. In this case, marble chips that I bought from one of the department stores as well. I mixed these thoroughly until I was confident that they were well combined. Next, I put the mixture into my homemade mold, tying some leather strings around it to ensure that the wet cardboard didn't bulge outwards too much. While obviously cardboard is a modern invention, it was easier to create an appropriately sized mold than it would have been with wood, so please forgive this more modern tool. Then I left the mold to dry. In order to get it to dry quicker, I used a technique I learned recently from cooking to make a conventional oven function as a dehydrator by leaving it slightly propped open on a low temperature. I checked the burn temperature of cardboard and leather to ensure that it wouldn't combust. Turning the temperature to the lowest setting, likely around 150 degrees Fahrenheit, I stuck the entire mold into the oven and left it to dry for about 2 hours. I didn't want to leave the oven on overnight, even on such a low temperature, so I then took it out and left it to dry on the countertop. After 24 hours, the brick seemed considerably dry and quite hard. Bits of sand came off of it still, but I assumed that was natural as I was using sand rather than ash, which would be much more finely ground and would have mixed much more thoroughly with the lime. I was concerned that the center of the brick was still moist though, so I stuck it into the oven for another 6 hours before taking it out before bed. After 48 hours, I was ready to reveal the brick and test how hard it was. It was surprisingly strong and was able to hold most of my body weight without cracking. However, when I picked it up, it cracked in half under the weight of itself. I was worried that it hadn't had enough time to cure, but doing the research, I discovered that even modern concrete can take 28 days just to cure to full strength. Roman concrete is still curing to this very day. For my final test, I decided to dunk the concrete in some water. Upon doing so, I discovered, unfortunately, that my replica was a failure. It immediately broke apart, despite how strong it felt and how dry it looked. This wouldn't be a faithful replica, as ancient Romans were able to use their concrete underwater for harbor construction. I think that there are three major problems with my replica that explain why it failed. The first was what I alluded to with lime. I should have used quicklime, which is essentially granulated limestone that has been heated to a high temperature in a kiln. This burns off some of the impurities within the limestone and creates a smoother cement. I also found out that it changes the properties of the lime entirely. When mixed with water, there's an exothermic reaction. My mixture with granulated lime did not have such reaction. I wasn't sure if heating the lime would be necessary and took the gamble hoping that it did not, so that I did not buy the more modern industrial quicklime available in stores. The second problem is, of course, that I did not use volcanic ash. While it wasn't available to me in stores, it does seem like something that you can buy fairly easily online. Perhaps in the future, another student can try to make concrete and can buy the ash well ahead of time to ensure that it arrives in time for their project. My third problem was that I needed to cure my cement mixture, not just my concrete after I had combined it. One of the parts of the process for making Roman concrete is mixing the lime with the ash and then putting that mixture into a mold, pushing it down with a stick repeatedly until there is no air and no gaps. Then that mold is covered in seawater and allowed to cure for an amount of time. This changes the nature of the cement somehow in a way that I do not fully understand, but I believe it allows it to be a more effective binding agent. Overall, this was a very informative project. Even though my replica was a failure, I learned a lot about cement in general, not to mention a lot about Roman cement and Roman concrete. I might even try to make a successful replica sometime in the future just for fun. Thanks for watching.